some people want to run amplifiers, right? You might see an external amplifier. You might be getting into the home theater game. Do I need an external amplifier? I think a lot of different variables are something that needs to be considered. One, do you have the space for an amplifier? Two, you got to think about whether or not your speakers are efficient or inefficient speakers. If you've got inefficient speakers, more than likely an amplifier would help, right? Because it would enable the speaker to be more dynamic, you know, and give you more, let's just say, loud explosions and things like that. It would have enough power to accurately be able to reproduce things like that without stressing the driver or stressing the amp that's trying to power it. You know, so I don't know, like my personal opinion, I feel like more than likely it's not a bad idea to have an external amplifier. Another thing is tonality, right? Amplifiers can add different tones. Some amps, like an Emotiva, may give you a cooler tone. Some amps might give you more of a neutral tone. Some amps might give you more of a warmer tone. You know, it just depends on what you're looking for. Let's just say you move from a receiver to a processor, right? Separates, and you want a certain tonality, then like amplifiers come into play. Not only that, you need amplifiers to be able to run each channel with the processor, you know, and amplifiers can have like 11 channels on them depending on what amplifier. Some amplifiers 3 channels depending on what amplifier. But if you have a receiver that has an internal amplifier built into it, more than likely you don't need it, but then it comes into play, like I said, thinking about your speakers, whether or not they're efficient, inefficient. If you got some clip speakers, you might not need much amplification, right? If you got some JTR like front speakers or something like that, you might not need much amplification. At least that's what Jeff says, right? You know, so it depends on the sensitivity reading and also your listening level. Like if you never really listen at reference, or you really never listen really loud, you might not need an amplifier, right? Like maybe you got neighbors, maybe you're in an apartment, you know, like you can't really go as loud as you would like to go because you don't want to disturb people, maybe the wife or maybe the kids or maybe whatever, right? So you might not need an amplifier in those cases, in those situations, you know, so it just depends. But if you want to know that you've got the head, like a muscle car, right? Like, you know, you might not need a V8 engine, right? But it's nice to know you got it when you need it, right? I got 2 Teslas, right? So I don't Teslas are faster than regular cars most times, right? So I don't always, and one of the Teslas that I have, I've got what is it called? The performance boost. So it goes faster than the regular ones, right? So I pay like $2,000 for that. Well, I don't always use it, but if I get on the highway and I need it, I need to get over like really fast, like it's good to have, right? It's always good to have more power. And as men, you know, I don't care what today's day and age they try to like, you know, make being a man not, you know what I mean? Like, look, we men, we like power, right? And we like to have more power than we need at times, you know? So sometimes, hey, if you want more power, you want to just know your system is capable, or you just want to future-proof yourself, hey, maybe down the road I might move into a bigger space to where I can utilize this, and I'm just collecting everything just in case. Or maybe I want to get a receiver, start collecting amps, use the pre-outs on the back of the receiver, and use the amplifiers to keep building until the point where I feel like I have enough amplifiers where I can get a separate processor, you know, and start, you know, moving in that direction, depending on what you want to do. But I feel like it's never really a bad thing to get an amplifier, but it can be a bad thing if you get an amplifier that may not fit your needs, right? Like maybe if you listen to music, you might not want a Class D amplifier. You might want an AB amplifier, you know what I mean? Or maybe a Class G amplifier, depending on what you're using, right? You know what I mean? Or what you're listening to, you know? So it just, a lot of things depend, you know? So, but as far as amplifiers, what have I experienced now that I have added an amplifier to my, you know, when I originally started, I just with a receiver, right? When I add an amplifier, I can hear different things in movies, right? When people move around, you can hear, you know what I mean? Like the clothes on the actors. You can hear when they're opening their mouth, you can hear that, you know what I mean? Clearly. If a pin's dropping in the background, the speakers are able to articulate a little bit more because they have more power than what they had before, because I'm running like inefficient speakers. So now they can kind of open up a little bit more and let you hear different nuances that you couldn't hear before in movies. Maybe if there's like some glass moving around in the scene, like the conclave movie, right? They're at a dinner table, you can hear the glasses moving around, or whatever. You hear that stuff clearer with an amplifier, right? So it depends on the speakers, right? Do you need an amplifier? And another thing is depend on the amplifier you want to get. And what I would suggest to people, if you decide to get an amplifier, experiment with different amplifiers. Don't just go and rush to a Parasound like amplifier. As my experience with Parasound amplifiers, some people love them, they swear by them. I don't really like the way they sound. You know what I mean? So I was like taken back when I went to different speaker conventions and people had the popular the Parasound audio amplifiers, and I heard them, I'm like, I don't even like the way that sounds really. And amplifiers a lot of times supposed to be neutral, not be able to hear it, but sometimes they're warm. You know what I mean? And sometimes they're cool, just depending on the amplifier. And then speaker characteristics as well. It's a lot of things, so just it depends on what amplifier you want, to add to your system. And a lot of these places like Crutchfield, different places, you can, have in-home trials, maybe Audio Advice Live, in-home trials with different things. If you don't like them, you can bring them back. You don't feel like it added anything to what you're doing, bring it back. You know what I mean? And no worries. And then you can see what it runs, how it runs with and without an amplifier. But I guarantee you, if you have at least your front center stage, your LCRs, the left, right, and center, you have those like using external amplification, the amplifier can now work on the side surrounds and your rear surrounds. Or maybe like put more, amplification up to your heights. You know what I mean? And then they may be a little bit more dynamic. So it's like it's different things that can happen. You may be able to open up your system a little bit more if you have like amplifiers added to it. Or you may do something like me and just decide to power all of your speakers with amplifiers. It depends. It's what you want to do, how much money you have, and then if it's really worth it, right? Separate, you have to have external amplifiers. Receivers, you don't necessarily have to, depending on, if you want to use all of the channels. Sometimes if you have a 15 channel receiver, maybe only 13 of them will run off, or 11 of them will run off of the receiver amps, and you might have to add external amps to get the other ones to run. You know what I mean? Or maybe 13 channels around, 15 won't. You might need an external amp to do that. So it just depends on your room, how much space you have, how big the room is. Are you going to listen at loud levels? Do you really need dynamics? What kind of movies you listen to? Some people, they might only watch dramas. You don't watch action adventure movies or sci-fi or anything with impactful explosions and stuff like that. You might not need an amplifier. If something is dialogue heavy, maybe you do want to hear everything rustling around, and maybe the amplifier can bring that out. It just depends on what you like at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? But home theater is about what you want and what you like. Don't let nobody bully you into getting things that you don't need or make you feel bad about your systems, because I guarantee you a lot of these critics who are on these social media accounts, I've heard some of their systems and they do not sound good. So make your system sound the best for you. You know what I mean? And if you feel like adding an external amp is the way to go ahead and do it. But I'm out. Come rate, subscribe. Let me know what y'all think about that. Peace.